Good afternoon, good evening, everyone. This is Endurance Chat. Hello and welcome. This is Cookie Monster FL. Joined here by Kris Washer 97. How you doing, Kris?
I'm doing very well. How about you?
Doing well. We're here to talk about the Rolex 24 that just happened, aren't we, Kris? It was pretty unique, I'd say, and really just I would say a really good end to the DPI era in terms of that 24-hour race specifically, or our marquee event for the IMSA calendar. And then a great start to GTD-Pro. So lots to talk about with this race specifically, so let's get into it. This episode of Endurance Chat is brought to you by The Racing Line. The Racing Line is a motorsport calendar and notification app for iPhone and iPad. It includes all major series, with more being added all the time, giving you a daily and weekly list of races so you can easily see what's coming up. All events are converted to your local time zone, so you no longer have to faff around adding or taking away hours to work out start times. Finally, it also lets you customize notifications for events, so you can choose when you're notified about a certain race series. The app is available on the iOS App Store, coming soon to Android. Just search for The Racing Line. Find out more at www.TheRacingLine.app.
Yeah, I mean, it was a pretty good race. I mean, I think it had some low moments towards after the 12-hour mark, but we still had, incidents, cars stopped on track, that had the full course yellows that made it a little bit spicy towards the end. But it seemed like throughout the majority of the race, there was always a class lead being fought for. It was always under a second.
Yeah, that's a great point. And another thing, too, to note that's, I would say, similar in that vein is how many different entries ended up leading their respective class at some point throughout the race. And while you had attrition, reliability, weather affect some entries, you saw so many different entries actually lead their respective classes, which I think really speaks to the level of disparity between just the worst and the best, team, which is just nothing at this point right now that you can see, which is incredible to say for a 24-hour race. Granted, all this is with an asterisk with the waiver rounds, but still, really impressive, just the level of professionalism and competition that we saw in this race. But we kind of knew that going in, didn't we? With the our pre-race shows, we were talking about that too. Just there were so many good drivers that were even in levels that you're like, that's an AM area, but that's still a solid driver.
Yeah, and most of them either A, raced at Daytona before in some form or fashion, raced in, Grand Am or American Le Mans Series, or raced before at bigger tracks. Even some of the open wheel guys, they raced, at Formula One grade tracks. So it's not like they go to Daytona and they're like, oh no, what do I do? They have some experience under their belt, and I think apart from the LMP3 sometimes, being the meme that they were, everybody seemed to keep it on track.
Yeah, and I think the cold temperatures had a lot to do with that as well. My favorite, I think, incident throughout the entire 24 was just like, it was like sometime during the night, and they were looking at like a Porsche that had spun or had gone slow or something like that, and LMP3, and it's after the bus stop. LMP3 just comes out of the bus stop and is in the marbles on the right side and just somehow loops it. Like, I get at maybe like coming off the corner of the bus stop and heading onto that, like just that transition and bumps, you can throw the car, but he was so far past the bus stop and like on the NASCAR part of the track, and he still spun and almost hit this Porsche. And I was like, oh my god, like these LMP3s are trying desperately to be a prototype challenge that we've seen in the past, but not any like crazy incidents that involve them with other classes. They just seem to just yeet themselves off into tire barriers for the most part. And the LMP2s seem to have the more like devastating problems. It seemed like, which was interesting to me. So I didn't foresee that. I thought LMP2 was going to be a little more mild mannered than it ended up being, or at least with some of the cars.
Well, it helps that I believe we had a bigger grid for them this year than last year. And And on the LMP2 front, what amazes me is how, like, because obviously in IMSA we do have the caution procedure where people who are a lap down can get their lap back, like, you know, like NASCAR, Lucky Dog. The 81 Dragon Speed car, if you remember, they had a barrage of penalties like right off the get go, and then they end up winning the race. So LMP2, with all the chaos, that somehow happened.
Yeah, and what was crazy as well is that you saw a lot of those cars that were impacted early on because of the unique rules of the Rolex 24. It meant that you would see those cars come back out on the track, or at least like continue logging laps to try to finish at 24, even if they're not in contention. And you saw more spins and more issues, kind of that had more of a cause and effect with the field outside of than nothing. But it still is interesting to see cars that were involved in wrecks that were in the first hour still circulating and spinning out like 13 hours in, and they looked brand new. So that was interesting. But definitely, I think what is going to be talked about the most is going to be how cold it was, and obviously just for the fans and driver, everybody, pit crews, whatnot. But just how cold the track was and how unique that condition was, where you heard drivers say it was going to be 3 to 5 laps potentially before the tires would fully come to temperature. Otherwise, like, they would treat it like it was wet condition, and they would just act like it was like they were racing with full wets, which is like a crazy observation. And I've never heard that ever uttered from race car drivers before, just how cold the track temperature was, which really hampered and hamstrung a lot of the drivers and the teams for just how they could utilize the cars in the first 5 laps, which is crazy to me. Like, usually it's 1 to 2 laps to warm these tires up, but it took that long.
And the temperature almost did. I don't believe it actually reached freezing point there. I tried to keep track of the temperature pretty intensely, but I don't think it reached freezing point. It went below freezing point. I was kind of, rooting for that back home. I guess so. That not sure you guys were rooting for it at the track, but because I want to see what the effects were going to be. And we got close to freezing point, and obviously the track did get pretty cold, but I don't think it had. I don't think it had the bigger effect that I thought it would have. That was poor grammar, but you get what I mean.
Yep.
Because wasn't it like a few years ago, the last couple of years of Continental's life in this championship, where the track was getting a little bit colder and everybody had problems? Well, compared to this year, Michelin, who we all know is a very good tire constructor, it didn't seem that we had that many issues compared to the days of Continental.
No, there was tire punctures, but I would also say some of that could have been the curbing and just the amount of close contact and like, probably there was some rubbing somewhere, but it wasn't that crazy. But because there's places at the track, especially when we have 60 cars, and that was a huge part of it too. Just the size of the grid and just the quality of the drivers and the cars, lent to a lot of like traffic jams and natural traffic jams where it was just like you had GT cars 2x2 in the infield section with LMPs just trying to get around and having to wait for almost like 3 to 4 corners. And some of those are really tight where you can't stick it 3 wide. And you just saw a lot of that happening. And I mean, even early on, you had LMP2s offing it because of just, how off the racing line they had to go just to overtake cars and completely miss their braking point, lock it up and hit the wall. So, and the crazy amount of spins. And I also think too that it really showed off some unique driver talents. And we'll get into that a little bit too with certain individuals, but it was really interesting. It almost felt like it was a completely different weather condition in itself, which I guess it was, but you don't ever think of just near freezing or freezing conditions like that having such an effect on the overall race as it did with certain drivers' ability to kind of keep pace. So Yeah, and I think also, and I guess lastly, just for our general observations of this, like new machinery too, right? So we have GTD-Pro. I guess to a certain extent it's the same stuff, but it's a new class, new concept, and then also sunsetting of DPI as well with this. So I think that was sort of unique too, where there was extra importance on both of those classes to perform well this year, and you definitely saw it from teams in both of those pro classes.
And you mentioned GTD, the pro class, and it being switched from obviously from GT Le Mans, where it was GTE machinery, to now it's just pure GT3, all pro lineups, unless you're WeatherTech, Cooper McGill. It's interesting what it did, because people, I think, including me, with because we're so used to, if there's two GT classes, they're not going to be BOP'd exactly the same. That's what IMSA didn't do. They BOP'd these classes pretty much the same. They treated GTD as just one class in terms of BOP is involved. It was interesting because obviously throughout the qualifying race and towards the beginning of the Rolex 24, we saw interclass battles that are really good. Even I believe the McLaren, the crucial Motorsports McLaren, was in the thick of it.
Yep.
But then obviously as the race went on, as the GTD cars went to their more amateur drivers, and GTD-Pro, obviously all pro lineup, they stretched their legs a bit, and in the live timing you saw a clear difference in the classes, in the class structure. They spread it apart a little bit. So I think I like that move from IMSA. I think it was fun watching the two classes intermix and battle with each other. I just don't know how to feel about it for the short races though. Like I won't oppose maybe like towards the shorter races, like having a class split, like having the GTD-Pro cars start in front of the GTD cars.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, it's well, let me rephrase this. If, let's say, qualifying is like canceled, or qualifying is interrupted, weather, etc., then I think it should be split. Here's the GTD-Pro cars and here's the GTD cars. If it's a regular qualifying session, I think I don't mind if it being mixed, because if you're that bad in qualifying, then too bad. You should be at your GTD-Pro car. You should be, faster than these GTD guys.
Oh, absolutely. I think if I had the ability to do any changes like that, it would probably be to, and again, experimental, but maybe do GTD-Pro and LMP2 and DPI and have those guys start as like a pro category thing, in quotes. And like the LMP2s might be a little bit annoying, but they're definitely going to be faster than just GTD, and then GTD-Pro in general. So you would actually have a gap there. GTD-Pro would kind of they'd have some annoyance with some slower LMP2s potentially, but outside of that, you would be free and clear of LMP3s and then GTD, and then you have those guys start as a staggered start behind them or something like that. If you had all 5 classes, do something like that, where it's like an AM start.
And by like split start, I mean like having the GTD guys start like exactly behind the GTD-Pro cars, not like have a separate split just for them.
Yeah. Well, you could do both either. I mean, but I think some separation for that should be there, just to give like a natural, difficult barrier for GTD, AM, the pro drivers in those AM cars, some difficulty, so they just naturally can't really get up there and run, especially because 2 hours 40 minutes. That's kind of enough time to do a core autosport move with their LMP2 by having their AM in for only 15 minutes or something like that, and then still being there in the end and winning overall, which is great. But we've seen IMSA not like that result. So I think something like that should happen, hopefully, in the 2 hour 40 minute races, and it shouldn't be a performance difference. That would just be annoying and an extra difficulty that you don't need, I think, right now, especially when you're juggling all these extra different variables in the next few years. But yeah, so I think now we can get into the specific classes, and go through that. I think I'll go over kind of just some of my observations of the track as we talk about these classes, and at the end maybe give some more. But it was a interesting experience going to the Rolex 24. It's definitely, I would say, as a narrative for my own personal trips in the last like 5 years, Rolex 24 is tough. It is, weather-wise, it is not fan-friendly. At least the years that I've been going, I think there's been maybe 1 year where it's been like a decent temperature and it's been enjoyable. And unfortunately, that's the year that I was in an RV, so I really didn't get to utilize good trackside conditions. But
that was the year I went, wasn't it?
Yes. Yep. And I really enjoyed that one. And yeah, you lucked out because it has been brutally cold or really wet or a combination of both for like the last 5 years outside of that one. But yeah, it was great to actually camp out campside. We were in NASCAR Turn 3, and yeah, it was really enjoyable when we weren't trying to get frostbite. So, but
this is r/WEC Sebring lore. Insider information. Was John there? He's always a hoot.
Yeah, John was there as always. He's got the blue lights up naturally. They were there like Wednesday. They like let people in Wednesday evening, which is really rare. We ended up getting a bunch of IMSA stickers because apparently they're not letting Daytona's not letting IMSA like hand out some of those IMSA stickers as they usually do for the track. And so they were like, okay, well, I guess we can't hand these out. So, buddy of mine like came by with a box of a decent amount of them. So we were handing a bunch of them out to like just random strangers throughout the weekend, which is kind of fun. And yeah, just, we kind of had it looked like a refugee tent campsite going on. Just a bunch of easy ups in my carport. We had I think Thursday night was gusty winds, or Friday night, up to like almost 45, 50 miles an hour gusts. So about half the campsite was looked like it was destroyed. I was like having to pull stuff down for about like 4 hours that night. So I didn't get much sleep, but everything managed to come back home in one piece. I didn't throw anything out that was broken. So that was good, but yeah, maybe we'll talk a little bit more about it at the end, but it was it was a unique and remarkable race to attend in person, just from how uniquely cold it was. And yeah, you definitely needed a couple of days to get rid of the like sunburn and wind, like the wind burn that you get when it's cold out. It was just you felt like you were like on the brink of death at the end of that coming home. So yeah, it was great.
And at least for Daytona and Sebring, we have befriended a actual IMSA official, and he does like to hand out free stuff. So
yeah. Shout out to you, my friend. Thank you, sir. I gave away some subreddit stickers to him and some other stuff as well for this time. So he's got some extra stuff, and I'm like, I mean, I keep it coming, but I'm just floored at his generosity. So I appreciate it. But yeah, DPI. So this is the final year for DPI, as we all know. And if you don't know, wow, what a rock you lived under. LMDH is coming next year. We got the announcement it will be last week, with GTP being the category name. So the cars are still going to be called LMDH, but the category they compete in IMSA will be called GTP. Is that correct, Kris?
Yeah.
Okay.
And the easiest explanation, obviously, IMSA, GTP, and then, WACO, European stuff is going to be the LMDH or Hypercar. It's sort of like back in the 80s,
or like Group H.
GTP,
They should just name it Group H. Just do it. I mean, if they already did this stupid, we're going to name a corner after each other, so now we have a Daytona chicane, which is the first chicane at Lassard. And now we have, instead of the bus stop, it's going to be the Le Mans chicane at Daytona. They should just name it Group H and be done with it. Like, if they're going to go GTP, then you do Group H, because you wouldn't do Group C. That's its own thing. You just make it Group Hypercars. That would work.
Ooh.
That's what I'm saying. Wouldn't that be great? What you can even go group hybrid, but that's kind of lame. Group hypercars, and then just play that. I bet I bet you they're going to do that. It's like the easiest win that they could possibly do, because right now it's called the Le Mans Hypercar category featuring Le Mans Hypercars. And it's like, why are you going to do that? Just name it. Just name it like Group H or something. Name it something different, like they did with IMSA. Anyway, so GTP is coming next year. And so, yeah, this is, I would say, a decent go to try to win this last DPI race for this category, which started in 2017. And what a run it's been. We'll talk about that probably at the end. But, I think I went with Cadillac. My pre-race pick was Cadillac. What did you go with, Chris? Did you go with an Acura or did you go with Cadillac?
I went with Cadillac too. I thought Chip Ganassi was going to win it until they had problems. Just a shame. I was kind of hoping for FWEC points per se, but I believe it was Meyer Shank that came out on top. I almost forgot the winner for a second.
The number 60 Acura.
Yeah, Castroneves' second Rolex win.
Yep.
After winning with Wayne Taylor last year. And obviously, the awesomest moment was seeing everybody climb the fence. That was so cool.
Yep.
Because he gets to do it within the same 365 days. Elio Castroneves gets to climb the fence at Indianapolis and Daytona. I don't think it's ever been done before.
Yeah, I don't think so. I don't know if it's been done like Indy first and Daytona. I don't know if anybody's gone Daytona Indy. That would probably only be like Mario that might have done it, but Mario was doing Indy before he started really getting into sports cars. So, or at least at Daytona levels. So I think his Indy win was before Daytona started doing 24-hour races. Anyway, but yeah, I think you're right on that. And yeah, there were a lot of announcers. I think NBC was talking about it a bit, and obviously the international feed, IMSA Radio, they were talking about that too, just for like what a transformation Castroneves has gone through ever since he basically stepped down from that full-time Penske drive at Indy and started driving for Acura in prototype racing, and how much that it's kind of just reinvigorated him, and especially that relationship with Meyer Shank, or Michael Shank, really, but that team has benefited both parties. I mean, I really expected at this point, or hoped at this point, Meyer Shank, Michael Shank would be getting to this point where they're winning Rolex 24s and Indianapolis 500s in the same calendar year. But honestly, they're a privateer team to a certain degree from a factory standpoint, and Helio being kind of on the downside of his career. I didn't really expect this, but it's really shocking and really cool to watch. But yeah, great teammates too. So that doesn't hurt.
Right. Tom Blomqvist, Oliver Jarvis, and I can't remember the fourth one he had.
Pagano.
That was right.
It was all right. He wasn't he didn't stand out, but he did what he needed to do, which is what you want from a fourth driver. But Elio was unbelievably fantastic.
And it's nice to see him back full time in IndyCar this year with Meyer Shank. From what I've heard, he was pretty fast in IndyCar testing. So he might have a good season there, but this isn't an IndyCar podcast, so I won't delve any deeper. Tom Blomqvist, obviously, I believe used to be BMW driver.
Yes, sir.
In GTE, and now with Meyer Shank, I don't think full time. Is he full time?
I don't believe so. No. Yes, he is. He's
Tom Blomqvist and Oliver Jarvis full time.
It's Ollie Jarvis and Tom Blomqvist in the number 60 car full season. So Elio and Simon are just the extra drivers for the NAEC rounds. Yeah,
because they have the IndyCar clash at Texas and Sebring, which is dumb, by the way, but it is what it is.
Yep, that's unfortunate.
How about Chip Ganassi? They were early on the favorites because of their superb driver lineup, and they were doing relatively well, no serious issues until I believe right in the middle of the night, where I believe the O1 had alternator troubles.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they both had issues. O2 actually had contact earlier in the day before sunset with the, I believe it was Mustang sampling number 5 Cadillac. So they had some damage that seemed to be cosmetic, but they were stopped for quite a few laps. They were, yeah, I mean, for I don't know, like they were about 20 laps down or so at the end of the race, 40 or maybe even more. Um, so that they were having some mechanical problems as well. That was late at night through, as in addition to the O1 also being in the garage. So yeah, it was kind of crazy how the GM related factory efforts were just really not happy. And it's weird to say, but you know, it still feels like the Chip Ganassi crew is still kind of coming to terms with how you need to day by day or race by race be setting these cars up or having a strategy for these races that is successful, because it's just they for sure look like they are the premier Cadillac team out there,
Mhm.
but the 31 and the 5 seem to be better and more sly in their strategy and just more you know, wily in their efforts. That, you know, they appear to be the more experienced teams, and it's paying off for them. So I think we kind of still saw this with Cadillac and the Chip Ganassi team, but they did have mechanical problems, which I don't know for sure the cause of those, but it still, you know, bit them all the same, where that they really weren't in contention when the sun rose Sunday morning.
Yeah, really towards the end of the race, it was really, I believe, um, Meyer Shank, Wayne Taylor, and I think the 31. And I don't think the 5 was in there from my memory, but I could be wrong on that. But there's 3 or 4 DPI cars definitely in the hunt. It was good racing throughout the race. You had the last year, like you said, of DPI at Daytona, and we'll see GTP next year. I think it was a wonderful way to end the chapter of DPI at the Daytona International Speedway.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And it's great to kind of see Acura kind of get the upper hand at the end of this too. But with BOP being a factor, Cadillac definitely having, I would say, the better car at Daytona, but getting hamstrung a bit by that BOP just because of how good that car is, like specifically at Daytona, and how much they were just strangleholding that entire that race itself. So good to see the disparity at the end of the day on the when it comes to overall tally in this category. And yeah, it did its purpose. I think overall people would have wanted to see more OEMs come, but I think for the time it was, and for I would say the absolute renaissance that the sport is receiving, you know, over the last decade, it's to be expected that this is, you know, that's a starting footstep. And to get 4 OEMs to compete for that long, and 2 to survive all the way to the end like this, and still have a competitive field, even though it's only 6, it was, it's still a testament to that first few steps. And I think LMDH and GTP is going to be that huge next step. So we'll see. But we'll go to the other pro category at Rolex 24, GTD-Pro. New category. Basically same old cars, a lot of same teams, a lot of similar teams that we are familiar with across the pond that have decided to come over. But strictly a pro effort for GT3 machinery. So SRO, essentially branded GT3 cars. But as IMSA likes to do, they like to rebrand stuff for their own. So they're called GTD. This is the same category that we've seen over the last, 5-6 years in IMSA.
Maybe 7.
7, somewhere around there. Yeah, 2014, I think.
2016.
2016. Sorry, yeah.
Of, I believe GT3 machinery actually coming in.
Mm-hmm.
So 2016, 2017 was when they actually allowed pretty much where they had GT3 regulations for GTD.
Yep. So pro category, all pro drivers. So this is no AMs required here. There's no AM requirement for the driver lineups, and so we definitely saw a pro and competitive as all hell race in that new category. And I think for me that not like it was expected. The last lap was nuts, and we'll get into that. But just from the BOP perspective, that seemed great. How all the cars were driving in traffic versus by themselves versus in the sunshine versus at night, and how cold they were. You saw a lot of different strengths, a lot of different weaknesses. But Porsche seemed to have the overall best car for the conditions. And their driver lineup seemed to just be able to repeat stint after stint, really, really top grade lap times. And then we saw that insane last lap battle for the win that ended with a huge fan favorite, the number 9 FAF Motorsports Porsche, taking the GT-Pro win for the first time. Kris, what are your thoughts on this new category and the first 24-hour race that we saw of all pro GT3 machinery?
I think it was a home run success because what IMSA did is that they saw the writing on the wall. GTE was dying, and the three full-time cars last year, they're like, that's not good show for the fans. So basically what they did was like, hey, we'll just do GT3s because everyone has one, and we'll just allow an all-pro lineup. Easy fix. What's interesting to me is that, because obviously the ACO has announced that they're doing GT3s starting 2024 in terms of at Le Mans. But I don't think they announced that it was going to be an all-pro category yet. So we might be looking at a future where, in terms of all-pro GT racing with prototypes, it might be the only 24 race for that to happen might be Daytona, which is interesting to think about.
Yeah, that's an interesting side note, and that actually, I feel like on face value, listening to that for the first time, I would say, yeah, that would totally make sense for the ACO to go that route and to only make it an AM category. Their aversion to, cost overrun, it seems like, for GT. I mean, even though they don't have an answer at all for this, which is frustrating as a fan and just as a general WC, fanboy, I guess, of just the entire sport in general. It's frustrating that they don't have an answer. But yeah, I don't know. I do think that this is going to be a unique category in every sense of the term, because the main structure for the SRO GT3 class is always to be a Pro Am or Am. And so this is always going to be a unique thing. But it is interesting to think about Le Mans being just a Pro Am or Am only kind of two classes like that, where it mimics very much everything else that we see out of these GT3 cars, leaving IMSA to really only have the sole Pro only GT3 class, which would be nuts to think about. And I think that would also draw in potential new OEMs and teams. But speaking of manufacturer diversity, I mean, we're talking about what, 9 manufacturers that were in GTD?
Let's see. Porsche, obviously. Lexus, Lamborghini, Ferrari, Corvette, BMW. I'm blank on
essentially all the major hitters. I think there was an article that said what GT3 car wasn't represented, or that was like kind of almost mass produced. It was the Bentley, which makes sense. The Nissan Skyline also makes kind of sense. And then it was like the Audi, which was like the normally produced GT3, or like a normally mass-produced GT3 car that wasn't there. That was the only one.
Yeah, it's unfortunate because around the grapevine, I don't think it's around the grapevine anymore. I'm pretty sure it's public knowledge. It's just that Audi Sport North America support for teams, it just sucks. And that's why I just didn't see any like GT4s in the Michelin Pilot Challenge Race or GT3 Audis in Daytona last weekend.
Yeah. And it's odd too, just because it's Audi's been in the game for quite a while, and while they don't have just the decades and decades and decades of experience of how to run these programs, like it seemed like before that they were up to snuff and they were on the caliber of like a Porsche or a Mercedes, and even Aston Martin, I guess, to a certain extent, and just to see them kind of really just give that all up on the side is unfortunate to see. And two, I think that's also where people were like, oh, okay, Audi's canning their LMDH after hearing that random rumor, a couple months ago. People were all on board with that because it just seems like Audi's just really not interested in like normal avenues of sports car racing, or they're not representing themselves like they used to, which is, it's an odd play for them. So, yeah, but otherwise, beyond that, I mean, just us talking about Audi, that was really the only the big hitter that we usually see that's won major 24-hour races is in the GT3 category that wasn't there. So, really just an insanely diverse and really, really competitive GTD-Pro, and also, I guess, the GTD-Pro-Am field. So, we saw attrition, and I've called before, like, people were like, oh, why didn't you want to use Aston Martin or pick Aston Martin for the Rolex 24? They had bad luck, man. And they, again, had terrible luck. And look, GTD Pro-Am was, we'll talk about that, or just GTD. We'll talk about that later, because, yes, there was an Aston Martin that podiumed. But the GTD Pro entry got involved in a wreck like 4 hours in, and probably would have been a couple laps down or something. They might have had more damage, but they probably would have gotten wave arounds and gotten them back on the lead lap. But then they got absolutely smacked after like sitting still for 5 seconds by an LMP3 car. And I'm just like, that is Aston Martin at Daytona's luck 100% right there. They literally get caught in, I swear to God, they have had wrecks at that, coming out of the infield onto NASCAR Turn 1. They've had wrecks that have ended their day like 6 hours in at least 3 times at that specific spot. I don't get it. And I swear to God, if anybody like is in Aston Martin GT3 machinery or GT machinery that's in a pro category, just don't go to Daytona, because that place is just terrible for Aston Martin. But yeah, that was at least one observation I had from some of the attrition. I don't know if there were any memorable GT moments for you in the pro category, Chris.
I remember before the sun went down, turn 1, I believe it was the Sun Energy 1 car. And then there's 2 other cars that got involved. But, I mean, that was when that first happened, because that took a lot of heavy. I believe that was one of the wrecks, the Heart of Racing car you were referring to.
Yep, that was it. That was the one.
And it just, because that took out, like, a lot of heavy hitters. Like, teams that, like, hey, like, if, like, they could be at the front towards the end of this thing. That one struck out to me. And the fact that, like, after that wreck, the TV direction immediately went to crap. But yeah. Regardless of that, but
yeah, static cams and and that's a weird, very short soapbox. It is a short soapbox, but it's really short. Like the fact that no one can seem to put up a static cam anywhere and just leave it there. Like if you just invest in maybe like $3,000 worth of more equipment, you already have probably cables to half of these cameras that are dynamic cameras that you control back in the communication truck. Like just the fact that if you just put a static cam and leave it there, and maybe you have the ability to adjust the zoom on it, but it doesn't move, it just sits there and it doesn't do anything but just capture corner exit or like specific areas where it's hard to get, like where you're gonna potentially miss stuff. Like it blows my mind that you can't just set 5 more cameras up in certain areas, even buy other cameras that are going to be turned off by human use for like 12 hours of the race, just so that they're there to capture some of that stuff. Because yeah, there was a few wrecks that made no sense. There's also an LP3 car that decided to conflagrate itself in the middle of the night that we didn't see because there was conveniently a banner poster thing that was in the way. And then he had like Rooftop Ray that was like nodding when they were like, I think that's a car on fire. And he's like, yep, it is. I'm like nodding the camera. But yeah, it's just, again, just real. I'm sure it's way more complicated than I'm making it seem, but like I just feel like all they need is just a couple extra static cameras, and then a lot of these problems of like some of these things would be solved because it's just like then you don't have to worry about TV direction. You're like, all right, put on like static cams like you'd see on like iRacing or something. Honestly, a lot of race fans would be like, that's fine. I'll figure stuff out from there. So, but yeah, that was definitely a yeah, that was a bummer to see, especially because they had so much. It seemed like at the track they had a lot of extra equipment there for the broadcast, and that they kind of like the actual broadcast dropped off a cliff kind of when it got into nighttime, was unfortunate. But yeah, at the track we didn't worry about that too much. It was good to have live timing and scoring up and occasional streams when we were able to get signal. But yeah. Anyway, I don't even know what we're talking about, but attrition, I think. All right. So we have attrition, but then we also have some new cars for the class. So some of these are new, brand new. Some of these are new to the class, and I guess they're kind of still new. We're talking about the Corvette C8R GT3 spec, GTD spec, whatever. And then the new BMW M4.
More like the D2 into GTE.
Say what? Oh, is it still GTE?
It's more like a D2 into GTE, yeah.
Yeah.
The actual like GT3 portion doesn't come out to like 2024, I don't think.
So it's a D2 GTE. Okay. And then the BMW M4 GT3. Both of those cars were struggling. I think Corvette obviously being more surprising because it is Corvette, so you usually expect them to be up there in front. They looked like they were decent, and they were just kind of running their own race, and both of them really kind of had their own problems. I think number 4 had contact with an LMP3, I believe, and then had some gremlins come up there and ultimately retired. The number 3 had another problem with the car. I think something broke on it, and so they were basically both really out of the running. Like 8 hours in or so, or they were in the garage for a bit, even in the morning too. So yeah, it was a little bit surprising. I think a lot of fans were reacting to that, but really, from what we had heard from Graham Goodwin and Marshall Pruitt, and just reading articles about what they, and even from them themselves, interviews, there was a lot of uphill climbing they had to do to get this car ready for competing in this category. A lot of it being just having to get used to a completely different, not necessarily geometry, but just like the tire spec, and the certain requirements that this category has that are going to be similar to, but not the same as GTE, especially for a car that was not designed to cross-pollinate between both. It's seeming rather difficult, at least right now, for Corvette, and they're definitely going to need a few more races, if not a lot of the season, to kind of get up to speed with that car. But it's Corvette, so they're not going to be down for very long. The surprising thing to me was BMW and how badly needed that car requires more testing. I don't know, man. We saw tailgates coming down off that car. I was like, I think like after 15 minutes, I think, what was it, 24 had the tailgate, like the rear trunk that usually like a normal trunk lifts up on one, from the hinges like that. This one was opening up the other way and was like acting like a sail on the back. It was the weirdest thing I've ever seen, and the oddest thing I've ever seen fail on a car. Maybe it was like hitting and leaning up against the swan wing at the back. But I don't. That was so strange. And from what I've heard too, is that they've had diffuser problems in testing in some of these races. So, yeah, what are your thoughts on both those programs, Chris?
Well, Corvette was always going to be hard to BOP because it's a detuned GTE car, so it's hard to get any like data on that. And try to mix it in with the rest of the GT3s and try to make it a fair race without being too OP. The BMWs weren't surprising because they had problems in the 24 Hours of Dubai with their cars. They did the 24 Hours of Sebring last year. I believe they still had issues, and also like they ran the last round of the GT World Challenge Europe Endurance Cup at Barcelona. They started the race and just didn't do anything after that. So the teething issues I still expected, that they should be stronger at Sebring because IMSA will have data to go off of from Daytona. And if they really wanted to, they could just take a look at what they did at Sebring in the 24 hours,
Yep.
and we'll see how it goes from there.
Yeah, and again, yeah, I think too, it's interesting. We're as the sport grows, and I think the sport is going to continue to grow just from the unprecedented levels of manufacturer interest, as well as drivers and team interest that we're seeing from different categories of racing and sections of racing. We're going to have a lot of fans that are going to be new to kind of the sport of how it works when new cars come in and trying to get these teething issues done. Some cars, like, to a certain extent, like, legendary Audi R8, were just like you built the car and you didn't need to do too much to it in order to make it run. It drove weird to begin with, but then, it was pretty easily ironed out, and that car was a monster for like years and years and years. Other cars, it takes a lot of dialing in, and that Mazda DPI especially was really like it needed BOP, it needed a lot of renditions, a lot of revisions, and a lot of more eyeballs from an engineering standpoint to get that car to start winning a lot of NAEC rounds, which it started doing. So it just really depends on the approach of the category from these teams standpoint, and also just the timeline that they're giving themselves and a lot of the expectations they're placing on themselves. So I think this is totally to be expected from both of those programs, BMW, Corvette, respectively. I mean, this isn't easy to do, and especially with BMW, they're taking swings in different directions all the time with these new Evos. Whereas you see the new Lambo Evolution 2 is just, it looks identical. It looks just basically like a Trofeo series Lambo. They're not really breaking any molds at all with that. So I look for way more success to come from both of those for both of those marks. And maybe not Sebring. But I think more towards the mid of the year, we should definitely start to see one or both of those start to hit podiums and maybe win. But who knows? Lastly, for GTD-Pro, that finale was insane. Lawrence Van Thor giving it his all to try to win the KCMG Porsche and not quite getting there. In the number 9 coming away with the win, especially with contact in the back stretch. Crazy move. I actually was standing on just a platform near my campsite. A neighbor had like a elevated platform in the back of his truck or something, so I just like climbed up there and was watching it. And I knew that they were gonna, because I saw him come off the back stretch and it's just high enough so you can see just into the bus stop. And so I had I knew that they were coming. I knew something was gonna happen, and I saw it live, just basically coming towards me, both those cars. And yeah, that was crazy to see live, and then to watch it on the replay of both the international feed and NBC was also really epic to watch and hear that as well. So one of the craziest GT finishes to a 24-hour race I've ever seen. IMSA doesn't disappoint, does it, Chris?
It was amazing, and I don't know if you watched the replay, like the last 10 minutes, every time they went into the international horseshoe, they were bumping each other. They were pushing each other out of the way. It was like NASCAR short track racing for a bit there. And what I saw was fair, hard racing. I think we need more of that.
Yep.
I think because everything was fair. It's not like they punted each other off the track purposely. And if people complain about that, then I don't think you need to watch sports car racing anymore, because that was entertaining. That was fair, hard racing, and in a series owned by NASCAR. I think it fits very well. And if you see pictures of the rear end, I don't know if Faf posted them or not, but it's been circulating around the internet. The back end of that Faf car, you can tell that it's been rubbed on. There's some damage there.
Yeah, it's knocked in. That thing is knocked in.
And the best part about it is that we avoided, for some people there might have been controversy, but we avoided controversy for the most part because the KCMG car, who was in second coming to the last lap in the bus stop, tried to make a daring move, and he came out on the short end of the stick. So guess what? No need for a penalty. No need for debates on if it's fair or not. If the move is fair, he tried to do a risky move. He failed to do it, and he paid the price for it. And then Faf won.
Yep. And I mean, even Lawrence himself was, he said it was fair racing and, great win to Faf, no hard feelings at all. And like he should, he shouldn't at all. I mean, he was running, Laurent really hard at the number 9. And yeah, I mean, people were like, oh, he deserved to spin out and stuff. It's like, no, I mean, if he would have held on to it, they would have been rubbing and flew off the bus stop, not even making the chicane at all. To come back on the track, and I mean, who knows how they would end up? It would have felt like the Cale Yarborough or Donnie Allison fight, where where they were like banging for how long down the backstretch. Like the amount, like if Lawrence was able to hold on to that, the amount of times you would have saw a video of that, because it probably would have looked identical. The way that those both cars were banging each other, like it would have continued way past where it ended because he spun out. So I thought it was great, and yeah, I completely agree with your sentiment. I think they, if it was prototypes, it's a different story. But just the modern GT racing that we have now, it's not the same that we had 40, 50 years ago. These cars are designed to run identical lap times, and that in a perfect world they should have no. And the drivers were identical. Everything was identical. Those cars should have no ability to pass each other because everybody's doing everything identically. So this is the modern version of having to make your own race, having to make your own pace. And that's what Lawrence was doing. And, would he have been able to even be in that position to try to overtake to win on the last lap had he not been doing that? Probably not. I think that this was an absolutely insane win. And I think the precedent has been set overall for IMSA specifically that we've had these kind of insane GT finishes with door banging hits on the last lap coming to the checkered flag over and over and over again. And this is another one of those. And I loved it. It was fantastic. So GTD-Pro I thought was going to be spectacular, and we're probably going to have more cars in the lead lap on the last lap fighting for the win. But how it turned out was absolutely thrilling. So I can't wait to see the Sebring and how that comes. Hopefully we'll have a repeat of 2007. So let's talk about the AM categories now. GTD, we'll start with that. A huge category to start. Decent amount of attrition for this category, which I think we kind of expected. But yeah, I think at the end of the race, we saw a lot of top 5, top 10 contenders have problems. Stuff that they could at least recover a little bit from, and others really not be able to, which elevated a lot of cars that I did not expect to be in even podium positions in GTD. But we had another Porsche win, Wright Motorsports, in the number 16 winning for GTD, followed by Magnus Racing. That was shocking to me, but I love that team, with a brand new Aston Martin Vantage that they were just getting used to, coming in second. And then in P3, in the Mercedes, the Gilbert Korthoff Motorsports, that is an interesting entry. And we'll talk about that a little bit. But yeah, what are your thoughts on a Porsche taking both GTD Pro and GTD category wins?
It's good marketing.
I think I picked this one to win.
I think obviously Porsche had I believe 3 cars in GTD Pro, and then obviously Wright Motorsports really strong contender in GTD. I don't think it was any conspiracy. I think it was just really good teams winning the race. But obviously Wright Motorsports had some help. I mean, imagine if the Sun Energy 1 car didn't crash, or
yep,
or maybe the Crucial Motors, because the Crucial Motorsports McLaren, that was the one that caught me off guard. I thought that car was going to be way worse than what it actually was, because I believe it was leading at some points during the race, and then I believe either before nightfall or right like after it turned after the sun went down. It stopped at around coming into NASCAR one.
Yep.
So if imagine if those cars didn't break down, maybe we wouldn't have saw Wright Motorsports take the win. But it's just it is what it is.
Yeah, and I'm the same way too. I mean, I thought BOP was great, and like I had said earlier, just the amount of cars that were leading their class respectively, almost just each individual entry that was leading its class individually, was pretty stunning to me. So to me, that means that it's good BOP. It means that each team is, even if they don't have the overall pace, they've got strategy options for them to take advantage to put themselves in position to lead the race, and capitalize on other people's issues, which we did see a lot of, especially in GTD. But yeah, it was great to see Wright Motorsports win. They deserve it. They're a really, really, really good Porsche team. And I think I picked them as my pre-race favorite. So, and yeah, and again, Magnus Racing is a crowd favorite. And so we all applaud and love Magnus Racing. Yay, yay. But yeah, that number 32 entry coming in in third spot. Chris, you want to give us a little quick brief reason why that might be a little bit draw some ire of sports car fans?
So Gilbert Korthoff entry. They had the qualifying race, as we all know. Guy Cosmo was one of the drivers. So basically, he was like what, like fourth or something, and and a couple guys pitted in front of him. So when he crossed the start finish, he obviously gained those places. But obviously, it wasn't truthfully his position. It was just before he made his pit stop. Mm-hmm. He goes into his pit stop, or actually his co-driver went into the pit stop. Guy Cosmo gets in the car, and he comes back out where he was, where they were before, the pit stop, like fourth or something. Then Guy Cosmo, because GTD still has a pretty good plethora of pros in it, and he only lost 2 positions. He finished like 6th or 7th, which in a field of like 22 cars, that's not too shabby. But I guess the team owner wasn't happy with that. He was like, "What the hell? We had the car in the lead, and you lost us all these spots." When in reality, he doesn't know what pit stops work or how pit stops work. And also, the guy's a huge Mercedes fan, hence like the Mercedes F1-esque, like silver and teal on it.
Mm-hmm.
And so he wasn't happy with those results, so he just let him go. He's like, "You lost us the race," and then he hired James Davison. So yeah, a lot of people got angry on that. Guy Cosmo in a separate Discord server. I think in a sim racing Discord, he explained it all. Just explaining what happened. He wasn't being malicious about it. It's just insane that a team owner would not know how racing works. It's like, yeah, like if the people pit in front of you and you still need to pit, you make that pit stop, obviously you're gonna lose those places back. It's just insane.
Yep.
But luckily, in spite of this, Guy Cosmo, I believe Friday or Saturday morning, he's gonna announce, I believe, his own race team. I think it's gonna be called Cosmo Sports. So we'll see how that goes in the future. See what events he'll be competing in. So hopefully it all works out for him. And hopefully, if he's in the same race as those Gilbert Korthoff guys, he wins against them.
Yeah, right. It was crazy how that was panning out through the race too. That I was talking to some people around the paddock, and yeah, the amount of people that were that had pretty hardcore opinions about the matter and how much they were not pulling for the 32 to win was pretty startling. And then to see it the last hour, them really get elevated into a podium position through other people having problems right at the end, and GTD was added to another storyline to it. And it was a very unique thing. And even with his explanation, like it does sound like there was just a communication breakdown in the heat of the moment with that. And from what I've been able, from what it sounds like too, that he was like fired on the spot and kind of thing. And this wasn't like we're gonna like mull about and think about it. Like he was, boom, you're out and you're gone kind of thing, like at the track. Like, so, that's not really, I mean, even if there was, due course for that to happen and Guy really deserved that kind of treatment, it's just not professional. And I think that's what a lot of the fans, teams, and, people are inside the paddock too. We're talking about just from a professional standpoint that's not how you do that. And that would not, that would send a bad message to the rest of the paddock on team relations and how you go about your business. So I think a lot of it is stemming from that too, and well deserved too, or rightfully so.
Whoever's editing this can censor it if they need to be. But Guy Cosmo is not a dick either. He's a very nice guy.
Mm-hmm.
Because I talked to him at Road America before. I was the annoying fan that asked him about his Asian Le Mans Series plans. And he was like, "Oh, I don't have anything right now, but I'm hoping we'll have." Like he was nice about it. He might have put like a PR face or whatever on, but he was nice about it. And you never hear any stories about Guy Cosmo like being mean or being just being a bad guy in general. So it hopefully his new team works out. And I don't know. I like Guy Cosmo a hell of a lot more like James Davison.
Yeah, I'll say that. And I mean, you said this before too, but McLaren's pace was pretty shocking to me too. I wasn't really expecting that. I think I was impressed by their Roar performance, and to see them do that well then, I thought boded well. And because obviously we really didn't see a lot of BOP adjustment, I thought that it wasn't like other people were holding their own hand here, that everybody else was trying, and it clearly was evident in at least the first couple stints that the McLaren chassis was very strong, or at least their BOP that they have right now for the class on both sides of the coin was really good. So just running into problems throughout the race, kept them off the podium. But I would have said early on they were the clear favorites to win that category if it would have gone green the entire way. Because the pace in that McLaren was just it seemed the top end speed was really good, and they were able to hold on to the GT field in the infield, and they were just able to pass cars freely in the NASCAR sections of the track.
Speaking of lap traffic, let's talk about LMP2s and LMP3s.
Yeah,
they were quite an interesting bunch throughout the race, weren't they?
Yeah, interesting is saying something. There's a video on YouTube, I think, right now, Rolex 24. 2022 crashes or all incidents or something like that. And it goes through Rolex, the Roar, and then goes through, but it's all IMSA top category. It's none of the extra feeder series. But during the race, over half, it's like 22 minutes long. I would say like 14 minutes, maybe 12 minutes are dedicated solely to LMP3 involvement in any spins, crashes, contact, whatever. It's just LMP3s throwing themselves at other cars or at the barriers or into grass. And yeah, I had said it earlier tonight, but it reminded me a lot of the LMPC days.
Agreed, yeah. Because I believe this year at LMP3, unlike the 2021 edition, actually did cause a safety car. So that was a first.
Mm-hmm. Yep. First time. Yeah, that was the whole thing we were cringing at last year, and they didn't throw a single safety car. This year they were more comfortable with their machinery, so I feel like we saw a lot more crazy maneuvers. But and again, cold will play a huge factor, and because both LMP2 and LMP3 feature so much raw AM talent, we'll say that, and good or bad, that we're going to see some people making mistakes or just getting a little bit too overzealous. And yeah, we saw that with some relatively good competition. What was it, High Class Racing, pretty much removing themselves from the competition.
Pretty much, yeah.
And that was unfortunate. One of those situations where it's almost, in hindsight, you're almost better to just completely miss the entire course and then just do a U-turn. Not even try to make the corner at all. Hitting the barrier and basically puncturing both tires, ripped the entire rear end off the car, just ended their night, and they were doing very well too. And
Well, we talked about the crash after turn one. I believe they got back on track, but then they stopped again towards not the international horseshoe, but the other horseshoe, and they didn't really focus on that too much, but it did stop there, and that pretty much ended the race for them right then and there.
Yep. I had PR1 Matheson winning, and I think they really thought that they had that class beat in terms of their overall pace. The team seemed like they were really confident. So, not to say that it's disappointing for them to finish fourth, but I would say that they're definitely disappointed in their result. One team in the opposite camp, I'd say, Racing Team Netherlands, and they had a really rough year last year in this category. But this year was polar opposite of that. They had a couple issues here and there, but it wasn't any contacts with walls or anything like that. And they were in the lead pretty late into the race until Dragon Speed, number 81, taking the overall the LMP2 victory, I should say, for the class. Tower Motorsport coming in third, the number 8 LMP2 as well. So Chris, what are your thoughts on LMP2?
It's definitely stronger. I mean, I think we had more European teams here this year instead of last year. And unlike last year, we have some European teams. Now keep in mind that this was because of the oversaturation in WEC. If the LMP2 scene in WEC wasn't as saturated, this might not even have happened.
Mm-hmm.
But we have Racing Team Netherlands racing the Michelin Endurance Cup, and then you have High Class Racing doing the full IMSA season. So we're seeing European teams doing the full season, or at least doing the Enduros, which the only person doing that before was United.
Yep.
In terms of teams racing over in Europe, so that's a stark contrast compared to last year, and I just think that's hopefully it brings more teams to LMP2, because who the hell knows what the grid's going to look like for GTP next year at Daytona.
Yep.
So it'd be nice to have all these LMP2 teams as a fallback, just in case we don't get the amount of entries that we're all kind of hoping we get.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and speaking of that too, United Autosports, I didn't expect them to be that kind of not near the front. They really got hamstrung a little bit by some strategy, but just also with some of the driver lineup. They really couldn't get behind anything. And again, I think too, we're just so used to in the past few years seeing United Autosport in any series they're in just being at the front or having something to do with being at the front. To see them really just not be in it at all, and to really be even some of these local yellows quite a few times here. It was very unlike United Autosports, but that's kind of this category, and that's the gamble that you take with your Pro-Am lineups that you're going to try to bring. So, I thought it was a great addition, and like you said, the category is growing, and we can only hope that it keeps growing. Once we get LMDH and we get the new LMP2s, that we keep seeing team interest as well as manufacturer interest. Hopefully, we start to see more than just Oreca's, and that also becomes a draw for this category as well. So, LMP3, we'll get to this quick, and then we'll do a little wrap up. This was something.
It was a race.
Yeah,
it was a race that happened.
Yep, it was a race. Andretti Autosport not winning. That is probably the only storyline that I can talk about outside of just how poor at times some of the driver talent was. That looked like outside of any I'd say class that was like waiting, potentially going to win their category. That that team in LMP3, Andretti Autosport, the number 36 car, was probably the best one that I thought in the LMP3 category to win their class. So they ran into some problems, I think, in the morning. They were winning and ended up being, 4 laps down off the lead. So that was a little bit disappointing in terms of, I think that was my pick to win. But Riley Autosports, number 74, taking the win. And what a stark difference from their LMP3 efforts of 3 years ago with their own machinery. With Sean Creech of Motorsport coming in second, number 33, and 54 Car Autosport, the number finishing in third position in that podium. This was interesting. A lot of spins, lots of spins in this class.
Yeah, obviously cold tire temps and how cold the track was helped with that a little bit. Obviously, being like an amateur, mainly amateur class, I mean, the only we have Prototype Challenge that uses LMP3s, but a lot of people would probably rather race in the big show than race in some support event. So you have these rich amateurs who's willing to pay a little bit extra to be a part, of the main event, and sometimes that doesn't go over too well. What did surprise me? I didn't. The 74 winning wasn't a surprise. I believe they were a powerhouse last year at LP3, that Riley Motorsports team. And it's not like Michael Cooper and Felipe Fraga are bad drivers. They're really good drivers. I mean, the only one that people might not know about or be iffy on is Gar Robinson, but he's a multiple-time Trans Am champion. And then you have Kay Van Berlo, who's kind of new, raced a lot of Porsche Cup North America. So, I mean, it's not like those drivers are, maybe apart from Gar Robinson, but he still has championships to his name, even though he might be one of the rich Ams. So I think many people overlooked that car because they looked at the bigger names, some like Andretti. But it didn't surprise me at all to see that car on top of the podium.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, and I think now that you mentioned some of the driver lineups, just looking at that too, yeah, they definitely were, they would have been my other pick. I think I picked the 54, actually, if I'm remembering correctly. But yeah, actually, now remembering the pre-race, we were given the nod a little bit to the 74 as well. So I would say a good showing for a few of those. The stark difference between the head of the field and the bottom of the field for LP3 was a lot. And then we'll do a wrap up, I guess, and because I'll mention this. I forgot to mention LMP2, especially Dragon Speed Entry. They won, and they probably won a lot with the help of Pato Award and Colton Herta. Basically, two of the IndyCar drivers that were in contention to win the chip for IndyCar last year, and they seem to really, really, really enjoy their time at, especially racing for the LMP2. Interesting because it is LMP2 and not for that pro category, but I think that's only going to help the sport. It's much needed enthusiasm from those drivers and from that open wheel part of the field. That is going to help grow the sport a bit, and it was great to get their reactions, a lot of interviews with them involving their win, and just to see their enthusiasm for it, and with their amateur drivers too in that lineup. It was refreshing to see, so I definitely really enjoyed that. But yeah, any thoughts that we didn't really cover so far, Chris?
Nothing that's really popping to mind right now. I mean, it was definitely one of the better Rolex 24s from memory. I think we can all agree to that. Obviously, I think 2021 last year it was decent, not as memorable, and then 2020, the longest green flag run I think post merger of American sports cars for the Rolex 24 that happened, and it wasn't like the most exciting race. I'm gonna put. And now I was there for that one. So yeah, I think we covered it pretty well.
Yeah, I'm a lot to look forward to for next year. And the send off for DPI, like we talked about too. Starting from 2017, this being last year for that, we'll have new machinery then. I believe we'll also have new LMP2 machinery, if I'm not mistaken, unless they decide to continue doing LMP2 next year, which I might have missed that announcement that they're doing that. But yeah, it's a great race, and even if we could replicate the same entries in all the same categories next year, I think it would be just as great. But we're gonna get we're gonna get crazy upgrades next year, so a lot to look forward to. Not to mention just to rewatch some of this. And again, I would say probably the hour-long review or the extended edition for this, probably on YouTube, about 30 minutes, well worth a watch if you haven't seen the race. So, but you're probably not listening almost an hour, hour and a half into this thing and not having watched the race. But it's well worth a rewatch for the extended, just the extended review on it. A lot of cool, interesting things that happened during it. A lot of attrition. Yeah, we didn't talk either about the LMP3 car that burned to the ground, but that also happened throughout the night. And yeah, if it's something that you haven't watched before, feel free to watch it next year. And if it's something that you haven't attended, absolutely try to attend it once. It was unbelievably incredible. Kris can attest to that, I'm sure. You'll be back at some point, I'm sure, in the future. But yeah, the pit access was great. I got to meet Graham Goodwin, which was an absolute treat. He was a legend.
How was that?
It was great. It was great. We got to walk around, talk to as we were walking around, we were just like random drivers and team members were like kind of walking up to him and talking to him. So I just got to listen in and stuff. So Scott Andrews talked about the whole Guy Cosmo kerfuffle because he was basically there, like right next to everything, and kind of listening to his insight on what was going on and what was happening and whatnot. It was really cool. Like I think if I could just literally walk around next to him and just, I don't know, be a security guard or something, and just talk to him all the while, like I would enjoy doing that for the entire race weekend. But he's got so much energy and so much passion for the sport. And it was very gracious of him to give me it was like 45 minutes of his time. We were just walking around the garage Sunday morning with about like 3 or 4 hours to go with the race, just kind of walking and talking about just everything. So it's awesome. If you can ever get in touch with him to meet up with him, I strongly encourage you to do so, especially just one-on-one. He will give you his time and effort, and he's an awesome character. So I look forward to meeting him hopefully at Sebring again. And he's awesome. It was great to meet him. So hopefully you can meet him soon too, Kris.
Maybe because I want to do Daytona next year instead of Sebring, because I probably won't be able to have the funds to go to Le Mans 2023. Mm-hmm. But I want to go up to a 24 race with the hypercars. So Daytona, I'll probably be more inclined to go to. Maybe we'll sneak Graham Goodwin in for an hour of his time for a little podcast recording on, like, let's say a Thursday.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
How does that sound?
Yeah, we can arrange something like that. Yeah. Don't forget too that we got the Creventic that will be at Sebring in November this year. So who knows? Mm-hmm. I mean, with the amount of potential GT3 interest in there, he might be enticed to come out to that one as well. So that could be a 24-hour race that you could see him at. But granted, we're all in it for the LMDH's GTP category. So yeah, it would be great. I would love to have a little quick chat with him. Knowing me, I'm in the IT profession, so I'm sure I could produce an entire studio's worth of equipment to pull off a decent recording of it at the campsite if we wanted to. But that would be a great little addition to next year's Rolex 24 content here at the channel. So, but yeah, Kris, I think that's all we could talk about with the Rolex 24 here. We got Age Le Mans series coming up. I'm going to talk about it a little bit. I was kind of going to put it off to do it later, but honestly, I don't know if we have a ton of like content in order to just because that would just be really short. It would be a really short podcast. Yep. So I'm gonna sort of pseudo talk about this with some level of non-intelligence at all. And I don't know. I don't know if you are down to correct me on things or to try to fail along with me, but we're going to try this. So Age Le Mans series. Recently announced that it was sold to the SRO series, I believe. Is that correct, Kris? or that it's
No, there's a partnership.
partnership? Sorry, not sole
Basically,
partnership.
um, like I 2020 either this I don't know if it starts this year or next year or maybe 2024. Who the hell knows?
I think it's
But
2024. I
they
think is
basically
what I
said
read.
basically the champion of the GT car of the GT class of Asian Le Mans and the champion of GT World Challenge Asia. Now I don't know if that's going to be an overall like combined championship, like you have to run both, or if it's going to be like separate.
Hmm.
But you get a Le Mans invite from that, so that's going to be interesting because obviously we've seen some teams from who raced in GT World Challenge Asia compete at Le Mans. Absolute Racing, Car Guy, for some examples. So it's not like they're quite alien to the fact that Asian teams at Le Mans. That we've seen some come through the ranks.
Hmm. That's a great kind of wrinkle for them to try to pull, especially from the SRO series. It's a tool that we've seen used, by the ACO to really draw more entries in these regional series to pretty great effect. I mean, it seems like it's worked pretty well at both ELMS and Asian Law series. And to see them kind of maybe reduce a little bit in Asian Law series, but also branch out in an SRO series is really interesting, and I think is a winning move. I think it'll do well. You'll see car counts rise just solely from that respect alone.
And starting like either next year, 2024, the champion of the GT World Challenge Europe, and I'm not sure if it's overall or just like endurance, but they get a Le Mans invite too. So we're going to live in a timeline where GT World Challenge Europe will grant a Le Mans invite. That's pretty crazy.
Yeah, right. And that just that statement is so like for years, like probably over a decade, we'd so groomed to like that is an incorrect statement, sir. Like that is not possible. And here we are. We're at the cusp of SRO series and ACO series interacting with each other, and for Le Mans invites, let alone just cross pollination between entries and that kind of thing. So it's not the way that people like it. And I'm sure everybody would want it done a certain way, and that the fact that we're still in this ACO / SRO type of cars that are intermingling with each other is a little bit confusing. But what these organizations are doing, at least from the outside looking in, we're seeing population growth when it comes to teams, interested parties, advertisers, marketing, drivers. And I think part of that is also just how you're pitching some of these reward systems. And it's not just winning championships and collecting purses, but qualifying for these legendary races that you can enter. That is also what's drawing a lot more interest to the sport as of late. So we have 4 races for this season, which is pretty much standard operating procedure. And this is also following COVID standard operating procedure as of the last 2 seasons, which is we're fitting this all in 2 weeks, and we're all doing it in the Middle East. So we've got race 1 and 2 going to be held at Dubai. And then that's going to be the Friday, February 11th and Saturday, February 12th. And then race 3, 4.
It's Saturday and Sunday now.
Oh, Saturday, Sunday.
Because UAE just now adopted the Saturday, Sunday weekend for, to adopt with the Western world, keep up with other markets.
Wow.
Because
okay.
obviously before UAE not sure how to phrase it, Muslim majority country or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
but a lot of expats live there and kind of I guess they want to appease to them and follow the rest of the world to make it easier for trading, and stuff.
Well, it's also a vacation hotspot too.
They had and they had they had the Friday, Saturday weekend and obviously the 24 hours of Dubai would start the Friday and end on Saturday to be respectful of local rules and on ways they do things.
Mm-hmm.
But now since the government was like, hey, we're moving Saturday, Sunday, I believe I think they're forcing, and I think they're having a half day on Friday as well, because obviously Friday, I believe, is the holy day for Islam. So they have a half day on Friday, so they can go to the mosque and do the prayers and stuff like that, so they can still, um, obviously be respectful to the people that actually living in the country, not just expats. Um, but yeah, now it's Saturday and Sunday. We already seen race weekends in Dubai or UAE racing Saturday and Sunday with Formula 4 UAE and Formula Regional Asia, which those should be supports to the Asian Le Mans series. So at least it's a lot of racing for one weekend because there's like Formula 4 UAE races, 3 Formula Asia races. Then obviously you have the 8 hours combined racing of the weekend for Asian Le Mans series. So it's a decent weekend of racing.
Yeah, that's a lot of motorsport to fit in there. And yeah, it's all fitting in with like basically less than 2 weeks. With then going to Yas Marina, the 19th and 20th, Saturday, Sunday, in February. So they're again, it's just, they would be going, this is a COVID related schedule. Essentially, we would not be going, I think there might be one race here potentially, but everything else would not be here. It'd be in Australia, and potentially China, Japan, Malaysia potentially. So this is definitely still being affected by COVID. And it's unfortunate that we still can't seem to get to those tracks, but I mean, it is what it is. And, but yeah, so take a look at the entry list. At least a provisional one, because I don't know if we have an updated one other than that, this is a late 2021 entry list. 4 entries I could see.
Okay. 7 cars on the entry list now.
Okay, gotcha. So it's dropped a little bit, a couple cars. Do we still have 4 in LMP2?
Correct.
Okay. So we've got 3 Pro-Am entries, AM entries, and then a single Pro-Am entry by Nielsen Racing. And then Bratislava, ARC Bratislava coming in with a Ligier 2, number 44.
Yep.
What is Dev will never die, man.
And 4 cars for the full season.
Absolutely.
And it just announced, I believe, United Autosports is doing the Yas Marina rounds, actually. So we'll have 5 LMP2s for the final 2 rounds, bumping it up to 38.
Awesome.
Which is still a very impressive entry list.
Yeah, that GT entry is unbelievable.
And just take a little time machine back to 2015, 2014 when the series first started. They had 3, 4-hour races, and they could barely squeeze out 10 cars on the grid. And they only had hour highlight. There's no way to watch it live. It was only highlight shows. And then a couple years later, I remember when they streamed it for the first time. I couldn't believe it. It was the 4 hours of Shuhai, and it was actually a legit broadcast. They had cameras on the track. I don't know if they had a pit reporter. I think they did. And it looked like a competent broadcast. And obviously, because it was a Chinese TV company, I think, producing the race, and everywhere else you went, it was mainly just static cameras, because it wasn't just one production company doing the entire season. I think it was like that for a year or two, and then they finally stepped up. It's okay, we're doing live streaming, we're doing a full broadcast, and they brought in Graham Goodwin, which is one of the best things they did. And this year, in terms of coverage, we're gonna have Nadia Nash be the pit reporter. She was always been really with the series. She wasn't last year due to the COVID protocols, but I believe she's in there this year. And then you're going to have Oliver Gavin and Graham Goodwin as commentary.
Excellent.
It reminds me of the 2 old guys in the Muppets. it's
Walsdorf and what's his face or something like that. Yeah.
Yeah. Obviously, they're going to do a good job calling the race, but I expect a little bickering back and forth. It's going to be hilarious. And as proved last year, those 2 have great chemistry in the booth.
Yeah, Statler and Waldorf. That's it. Yeah, and I love the commentary crew. Ollie Gavin is a unique personality. You kind of want him to do maybe a little bit different things here or there, but honestly, he's unique enough and an interesting character behind the booth that I love him, especially paired with Graham Goodwin. They're a great commentary crew. So I think for me, the things to watch for Asian Le Mans race, 'cause I don't want to go through the whole entry list. We'll just kind of go. We'll pick and choose if we really want to talk about anything. But obviously LMP2s, that's always an interesting site for that. LMP3, Conrad Motorsport coming back with their Janetta. That thing never shows up anywhere other than this series, apparently. So that'll be fun to at least watch that. Try to compete with the Ducanes and Ligiers all around it. And then that crazy huge GT field. I mean, there's almost like 20 cars, if not more, in that category. You got Garage 59.
And there's a subclass too.
Yep, and subclass with the AM category. But yeah, I mean, we've got a lot of VLN affiliated teams here. We've got a lot of new chassis. Walkenhorst pretty much doing their shakedown of their BMW, the new M4 that they'll be kind of working that with. Herbeth Motorsport with the 911, Kessel Racing and their Ferraris. So a really good quality GT field.
Very good entry. So I want to make a point on the G Drive entry because it's one of the most notable stories in it. So basically, a couple months ago, I was really bored out of my mind. So there's this app called Portable TV that I found in my Roku. It broadcasted some KHL games, which is the Continental Hockey League, basically Russia's version of the NHL. Mm-hmm. I started watching a game, and they're like, "Oh, we're going into they're playing in Dubai," which immediately catch my attention. I was like, "Oh, okay, they're doing like an international series or whatever, and they're playing in Dubai." Then I noticed on the corner of the rink, on a platform, was a prototype with a G Drive livery on it. I was like, "What's that?" So I screen capped it, posted it in the r/WC Discord. I was like, "Hey guys, look what I found!" And they're like, "What the hell is that?" And people, were like trying to figure it out. They got closer images. It's like, looks like an LMP3, but it might just be a show car. Promote G Drive. A couple days later,
yeah,
LMP3 entry for the Asian Le Mans series, and guess where the Asian Le Mans series is mainly going to be? The UAE. We broke the story before the news outlets broke it. Technically,
that's awesome. Hey man, just show you what social media can do in this new technological age, man. You can infer and piece together some stories before it breaks. That's how it works, man.
Yeah.
I'm the GT actually does work. Yeah, I'm really excited about it, man. That's going to be an entire series to watch just for the GT category itself. That's more impressive than even some of the IMSA entries that we've seen for the GTD category to a certain extent. There's definitely some AM-like entries in this list. Don't get me wrong, but there's some really solid entries as well.
And for the dates, so just in case some people might be listening to this a little bit later, the season starts February 12th, and the season will end on the 20th of February. So it's two weekends of your life of just Asian Le Mans. And actually, the first race is actually on my birthday, February 12th.
Yeah, and happy early birthday to you as well. I'm sure this podcast will come up right around then. So, happy birthday to you, my friend.
I'm here to watch the February 12th race, the first one. I'm not sure if I'll be able to make the 13th one due to hangover reasons, but at least
understandable.
It should be a very good season. I know last year we had a very good championship fight towards the last round of the season. So we'll see what happens, and hopefully we have a really good championship. I think taking a look at the Le Mans invites, I'm looking at Wikipedia. Might not be the most trustworthy source. Basically, first in LMP3 gets a Le Mans invite, and then first in LMP2 and GT get a Le Mans invite. And then I believe second through fourth in GT get a Le Mans invite, but I don't know if that changed. I thought it changed. The rules changed on that by some bit, but I can't remember. So, but basically, if you win the championship, you get a Le Mans invite, and that's the reason why a lot of these European teams are here, because it's probably easier to get a Le Mans invite through the Asian Le Mans Series than through the ELMS, which is a very highly contested championship, and cheaper to run too if you're just a GT3 team.
Yeah, absolutely. But yeah, so that's going to be, especially for all the categories, we're going to be seeing a lot of close battles, and I wouldn't be surprised just on the entries that we're going to see some coming together on the track. Wouldn't be surprised to see a decent accident or two coming from this. It's going to be crowded on these tracks, so. But yeah, looking forward to it. That's going to be an intense 2 weeks of racing, and again, when this comes out, probably within hours, we'll start the season for the Asian Law Series. So. Definitely encourage you guys to watch it. It's been getting better and better every year. It's like I said, unfortunate that it's only at 2 tracks in the span of 2 weeks, but in the future it'll go back to what it used to be, and especially going to different tracks, different venues, and I think that will build even more legitimacy to this series. But it's doing it on its own with its own merit, doing a good job with it with quality entries and a good strategy to make it through COVID. So. So that's kind of going to wrap it up for this episode of Endurance Chat. It was great to talk with you, Kris, especially to talk about Rolex 24 and the Asian Le Mans Series season coming up here. Hope to see you next year to one of these events. I'm sorry you can't make it to Sebring. Would have loved to see you, but man. Any extra thoughts on the last couple of weeks of motorsport coming up here and that we just saw from you, Kris?
I think that pretty much wraps it up. We saw very good racing, and lots more good racing to come.
Yeah, likewise, and definitely look forward to seeing more GTD-Pro action and more announcements for GTP and LMDH. Start seeing more shakedowns from those to come throughout this now, what is the current new IMSA 2022 season. So, on behalf of Kris and Flood, who could not make it today, Mike, sorry about that, but... my name's Austin, Cookie Monster FL, and have a great day, guys. Peace out. Gazoo.